All right. Well, it's just after 4 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Danielle Anderson, and I'm a mortgage lender and short-term rental host. I've been a short-term rental host for the past 6 years, and it's actually what made me do a career change because I truly believe in the power of building wealth through real estate strategically, and in the power of house hacking or having somebody else pay your mortgage or short-term rentals. And the reason this event came about is because there's been a lot going on with short-term rentals. We had COVID, everything happening in March. And so I wanted to get two experts that really live and work in this field in real estate, Effortless Rental Group and Let You Let. So Dana at Effortless Rental Group runs Effortless with her brother. It is a all hands-on short-term rental management company. They're actually my management company, and they're absolutely amazing. I just get a check on the 15th of the month and can go do my thing and just mark off on my calendar when I want to use my house and when I do not. She also founded Mile High Host, which is a community advocacy group for short-term rentals, giving short-term rental hosts a voice at our city council. And she sits on the STRAC committee, which is Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee, helping really shape the regulations that we have here in Denver. And then joining us as well is Mark with Let You Let. Mark has been in commercial real estate for over 20 years and founded Let You Let in 2017 to connect tenants to landlords willing to offer short-term rentals. So it's a win-win for both landlords as well as tenants. And here in Denver specifically with our primary residence regulation, it really helps investment owners be able to capitalize on short-term rentals as well. So in March, since March, a lot has changed. One, I was living in Santiago, Chile. I just embarked on something called Remote Year, where I was going to be living in a different country every month for a year. Dana had my house in Denver all set up as a short-term rental, and I was going to live and work abroad and do that for a year. Well, COVID hit, so that changed a lot, and now I'm back stateside. And one of the differences, though, that happened between March and now is in March, I was one of the anomalies that I could work from anywhere. I just needed a phone and internet. And now when we're sitting here in September of 2020, for the last 6 months, people have been working from home, doing their same job from anywhere. And so that dynamic within short-term rentals has changed because people are able to stay longer and they have different preferences in what they want. Dana's gonna go into the statistics a little bit more pre, during, and after COVID with AirDNA data, but that's one of the things that resonates with me is before when I worked at Hormel, before I got into lending, I was like, oh, I could never go on Remote Year. And now multiple people are doing their job from anywhere. And Kate Lister, president of Global Workplace Analytics, her quote says, our best estimate is that 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working from home multiple days a week by the end of 2020. So the shift in our environments has definitely changed. And there's been a lot of negative things this year. We were just talking about the fires and we have to go outside with a mask, and there's a lot of terrible things happening in 2020, but the fact that more people might be able to work from home might be a positive one. And it does impact our real estate, and it does impact short-term rentals. So Dana, you want to quickly introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what Effortless does and then dive into the data?
Absolutely. Just to dovetail off of something that you had said is this idea that more of the workforce will be working from home and how that may be a positive thing. I mean, it really depends on what your home is like. So for example, I'm speaking to you from my kitchen countertop. And so I didn't have an at-home office at my house because prior to COVID, I was working in an office space. And so not only has COVID caused people's wheels to turn about how they can get creative, whether it's, hey, I want to buy a new property, or hey, I can work from home means work from anywhere. It's really pushing them to stretch their imagination in ways they didn't think that they would be otherwise able to. So this time has been very challenging for a lot of industries and a lot of individuals, but I think that we're finding silver linings throughout it. And that's why our business at Effortless Rental Group has continued to thrive and boom amidst these challenging times that we're in right now. So to give you a little background on who Effortless Rental Group is, we are a Colorado-based short-term rental property management full-service hospitality provider. So what do all those words mean? Next slide. The service that we provide for our clients is it's full service. So we're doing everything from maintaining the property, marketing the property, building the listing, photographing the property, guest communication and 24/7 support during their stay, as well as revenue management and emergency services. We're taking care of the guest now more than ever. So our business started about 5 years ago, and it was heavily focused on the client side of the operations. And now more than ever, the guest is looking for that concierge-like stay. They want to have possibly groceries delivered at the home before their arrival. For our properties that are in the mountains, they want to have somebody come to the property and do a ski and boot fitting prior to hitting the slopes on their vacation. So it is more of that red carpet experience than we've been previously, but we take care of that for our clients so that they don't have to. So as Danielle said, we are managing the full operation and then just doing a direct deposit check into their bank account once a month for all the previous month's rentals. Next slide. So short-term rentals pre-COVID, there's been a strong trajectory of growth for short-term rentals. This graph here in front of us shows 2015. That's when it really started to take off, where more and more people were not just thinking of a second home as a way to short-term rent their property, but even their current homes, where they could subsidize the ability to travel around the world, like what Danielle was explaining. So as you can see, this graph, it's kind of light along the bottom there, but the time stamp on that far left side is 2015, and there's been exponential growth, and it was continuing to climb all the way out through the end of 2019. Next slide. And Denver has been on the map. So Denver is one of those destinations that you don't necessarily think of as, a hot destination like New York City or San Francisco or Chicago, but it's a destination that people have been attracted to. It put us at number 16 on the map of short-term rental revenue growth for December of 2019. When you think about a property that's going to be successful as a short-term rental, there's a fine balance between how expensive the property is and how much demand the property will have, where you can subsidize the expense of making that investment and recoup your costs at a greater speed. And we'll dive into that a little bit later in some slides we talk about with revenue forecasting. So how has COVID impacted the short-term rental market, and where are we now? I did a presentation a couple months ago, and we broke it up into two segments of how has it impacted the market, and then where are we now? And in a lot of ways, we're still dealing with the impacts of COVID. As you can see in the next slide, there's a drastic drop off of bookings that took place. It was a total of, I want to say, from the time period of January to April, there were global bookings were down 61%. It was pretty drastic. Our business, Effortless Rental Group, we saw our portfolio of 100 properties have all reservations wiped clean. So it was devastating for us as a company. It was devastating for our clients whose properties we manage. With the safer at home and the stay-at-home orders in place, like travel came to a screeching halt. But as you can see in this graph here, it's starting to pick back up, and we are starting to see that rebound. So people staying at home can only be told to stay in and be expected to quarantine at home for so long before they say, okay, I need to get out, I need to hop in the car, and we need to go to a drive-to destination. So comparatively, when you think about short-term rentals and how they perform compared to like a hotel, we started to see some vast differences in the resiliency of hotels compared to short-term rentals. So, yep, you can go to that next slide. Thanks, Danielle.
Yep. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So for some reasons that feel obvious to me and maybe are not obvious to people that are not living and breathing and sleeping short-term rentals, when you think about the idea that you had to quarantine safely away from people that maybe are in a elderly population or people that have health risks that they're dealing with, the idea of being forced to do a 14-day quarantine in a hotel room that doesn't have a kitchen, that's one large room, that, you know, is maybe on the 9th floor of a hotel that you have to pass through a hotel lobby. It was a clear, obvious reason as to why short-term rentals became the accommodation preference. So for, like I said, quarantining during COVID, and even now, is, you know, the idea of people are starting to go out and dine at restaurants, but they're still looking to have the option to cook at home. So, you know, and living spaces, larger properties, single family homes that have a backyard where people that are used to living in a city, they are deciding to go to those drive-to destinations more than they have historically. And so where we would right now see like a shoulder season for our mountain properties, we're seeing them have a really strong interest in a high occupancy as well as a high nightly rate during a time that would traditionally not be as busy. Next slide. So this graph here shows you the impact of like those first couple weeks when COVID hit. The green line here shows you hotels. Hotels had the biggest impact that were based on occupancy that was measured in this graph. And they've had the biggest rebound because they dipped the lowest. But if you think about it, I know that Denver, we cleared our conference calendar. So all business events that were taking place for the rest of the year have been removed. So a lot of business travelers will go and stay at a hotel because it might just be them and one other. And so maybe a hotel accommodation makes sense for them. So the hotel industry was heavily impacted the most during this COVID time that we're in. But again, you can see as we move towards June here on this graph, all sectors of accommodations have been rebounding to where they were prior to COVID. Next slide. So, you know, looking ahead right now, we feel pretty optimistic about the opportunities that we're seeing. Like we said, the example that Danielle said, people are working from home more now than ever. We're having clients that are coming to us saying, hey, I'm not required to go back into the office until the end of 2021, and who knows where we'll be then. So we've had clients reach out to us saying, I'm buying an RV and I'm going to go travel around the US, and I've got a 5-bedroom here in Denver and I want to rent it out while I'm gone. So what we'll do is when somebody reaches out to us for you know, inquiry, trying to find out what kind of money they could make from their property, we have a partnership with AirDNA, who is a data analyst, and we'll put that address as well as the number of bedrooms and bathrooms into our software. And then AirDNA will put out a report that shows the earning potential for a specific property of interest. I think it's a pretty cool report. That's a great place to start from. You know, what it will do is it's going to pull up to 12 of the closest properties in location as well as size. And in this example here, we pulled up a 2-bed, 2-bath ADU in Denver in the Highlands. And you can see on the left side, it says annual revenue. So it's gross annual revenue based off of up to 12 properties and how they've performed. It's estimating that this property we have in the tool here could earn $42,000 in gross annual revenue with an occupancy rate at 68%. So those are both, you know, pretty strong numbers. The cool thing is, just for some bragging rights for Effortless here, I put like a little square around the comparable properties, and it's probably hard to see with how small it is, but it's a property that we manage, and it's showing, I want to say it's at 56K in revenue. So I always say that this tool is a great starting point. It's a great way to get a glimpse to see how your competition is performing, and clicking on those Airbnb listings to say, wow, clearly they've used a professional designer, or clearly they've upgraded their kitchen, and like it kind of gives you a feel for how you may perform comparatively. And then it shows you how close all of those other comparable listings are on the map that's in the right-hand corner. So I wanted to show you guys both a local Denver property performance projection as well as a mountain projection. Does it show that Breckenridge one?
Is it up?
Oh, yep, here it is. Yep, I can see it. So again, another example of a 3-bed, 3-bath at 530 South French Street. This is actually for an address of a property we manage there as well. I was able to get them to pull, it pulled up the property that we managed, and it's showing it's bringing in 143K. The reason I highlight this is that if you do management yourself and you're managing the listing on your own, you may only be listing it on Airbnb or only listed on Vrbo. But when you work with a management company, they're able to push that listing out to 200 booking platforms. And so the reason that we're able to produce more money than what the tool may suggest is because we're getting so much more visibility, so many more eyeballs and different audience segments on that listing, which in turn increases the earning potential. So again, these are reports that we're happy to run for you. They're a pretty quick, turnaround time for us. Danielle asked me, like, how many reports do you want to offer the group that you'd run? If you're asking us for too many reports, we'll let you know, but feel free if you want to reach out and say, I'm curious, I've got a property. We weren't even thinking about short-term renting, but after we heard this presentation, we're not considering it. Would love to know what we could earn. You can reach out to me and I can run that report for you at no problem. AirDNA does have a subscription fee where you paid to get an unlocked version of it, but I have no problem helping you out and running some of those reports for you. So feel free to reach out.
Perfect. And I'm going to jump in, Dana, in just the AirDNA data. We've got a few realtors on the call as well. It's similar to comparables when selling a house. Like, it doesn't take in consideration every single detail when you're running the AirDNA. If you have the designer and the granite countertops, I know that my AirDNA report came in about 35,000 under what I'm actually earning on my Denver property. So it's just kind of grain for thought, or I think I messed that saying up, but but a good starting point, like Dana said.
I always mess up saying, so no worries there. So looking ahead, a cool opportunity that I wanted to share with you folks is the regulations in Denver have changed the landscape of our client type as well as the size of our portfolio. So I didn't go initially into where we operate, but our biggest footprint is in Denver. We have properties in Boulder and the surrounding communities, Wheat Ridge, and all the way up to the mountains. We have a handful of properties in Breckenridge and Vail, Avon, Granby, Winter Park, Fraser. So we do have a good stretch of business, but because of the regulations being as strict as they were in Denver, and knowing that the demand is there and that Denver has just been a destination that has been on the map and continues to grow in popularity, we wanted to be able to get that market share. So this is where we pivoted into this new project called the Espadine. So this is a build, I want to say it should be done in the next 60 to 90 days. It's at 29th and the developer of this building has worked with Effortless for a few years. We have another project with them in Rhino, but this property will have a hotel license. And so therefore, when a property has a hotel license, they're able to list units on Airbnb without being required to have a primary residence license. So it shifts some of the things like taxes, some other factors that are a little bit more nitty gritty, and I'm happy to set up a call and chat with you more about these details. But they are selling units in this building. So the developer is keeping half of the units and then selling the other half of the units to individuals that want to still stay in the Airbnb market, but they just can't rent out their home as a primary residence. So we do have some clients that decided to sell their homes here in Denver and then buy a property here, so they had a place to stay that they could call their own, that they could still rent out when they were not using it. So the Espadine is a project we've been working on for the last year, and Effortless Rental Group will provide management. It's all high-end finishes. The whole stay will be shoppable. So if you love the plateware that you're using during your stay, there will be a tablet within the unit where you can learn about the artist. It's going to be all local artisans, and then buy straight from that tablet. So we're really excited about this new project, and it's just the way that Effortless has been pivoting here locally. And then the last bit I wanted to share with you about that Danielle also mentioned is the Mile High Hosts is a local hosting community advocacy group. The strongest way, or the easiest way you can keep in touch with us is to join our Facebook group. We host events. We put on the Good Neighbor Summit last fall, and it's just a great way of being able to ask each other for resources, whether it's you're looking for a cleaner, or you have some guests at the property that are troublesome, or you want to find out about a good place to invest. It's a great community of a variety of people, and I'd say it's definitely something that if you're a realtor and you want to keep informed on what's happening with the changing regulations, that would be the first place that we share what's coming down the pipeline and what you should be aware of. And I think that's it.
Thanks, Dana.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, Mark, I kind of gave a brief introduction, but Let You Let is the company that allows connects tenants to landlords. So if they are in Denver and have investment properties, then landlords can capitalize on short-term rental income. Or for tenants, it's a great way to earn a little bit of extra cash, even as a renter. So Mark, take it away.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I don't have to say anything more. You pretty much did it. But yeah, welcome everybody. So Let You Let's mission is to really give a renter a new amenity, which is home sharing, and have their landlord or their property owner, property manager, also give them approval to do this, so they don't have to do it under the table or in the dark anymore. It's basically tapping into the spirit of what you mentioned earlier, and a lot of communities where the one host, one home, the primary resident is the actual host of the unit. And we're creating tool sets to make that relationship between the building owner or the property investor and the long-term tenant work around home sharing. So next slide, please. So just an overview for us. Let You Let is it's all digital solution, and it provides a tool for building owners to make additional revenue. So how Let You Let works, next slide. First and foremost, we are on top of the basic dynamic of a long-term renter and a property manager. This is not what a lot of people just calling short-term rentals, where there's a furnished vacant apartment or unit and the manager is managing it off-site. What we are working with is just a traditional long-term tenant that owes their base rent to their landlord every month. And so we don't change that dynamic at all. Next slide. When you add Let You Let to that dynamic, then you allow the long-term renter to host paying short-term guests, and of course with owner approval, which creates a new revenue stream for the property. And the revenue obviously benefits both owner and resident. So the goal for the resident is, of course, to use their property to reduce living expenses. And obviously for the owner, we can add additional revenue stream on top of monthly rent as an ancillary income stream for that property. So how we do this, we are in partnership with Airbnb. We have a proprietary API connection that essentially, when there's a long-term tenant who's enrolled with Let You Let, we connect Let You Let to their Airbnb listing. And we take just relevant information from that listing so we can populate a dashboard for the property manager so they can see how much the resident is hosting, and of course track the revenue and financial activity of that unit. Prior to any tenant signing up and activating a Let You Let, we go through a very simple agreement, which actually can be used as a lease addendum that really gives the renter a formal approval that they know they can host. They can get their local registration or what have you, and show that they're not violating their lease. And for the owner, it protects them for violations of the hosting activity that they agreed to prior to entering into the arrangement. So getting paid, it's kind of downstream from Airbnb. So after the guests stay and Airbnb remits the payout to the host, which in this case is a tenant, Let You Let will track that through our API and immediately invoice the tenant for the money that they owe the landlord at that time. We take a 4.5% transaction fee at that time. And so the landlord gets their share and the resident can keep the lion's share of the hosting at the end of the day. So for the property manager or owner, they get different dashboards where they can track financial activity. They can see the calendar of the agreed to paired, we call it, listing, and forecast, given the calendar, what their financial activity should look like in the future. Next slide. Or so for the owners, again, this is if a owner has maybe a multitude of different buildings or several units within a building or a couple of single family houses, we can organize all the different home sharing agreements that they have with various tenants all in one place. So it's easy to find and keep tabs on the different approvals and limitations that they have for various agreements. Okay, so setting up Let You Let is pretty straightforward for either side. Either a renter can sign up using our simple wizard and fill out a few questions and then create an invitation to send to their landlord. And we'll help walk the landlord through the benefits of approving a home sharing for that unit. Or a property manager or owner can use their portal and invite either a block of tenants or an individual tenant into the program. Then with an email, we'll walk them through setup from their side. And either channel connects to the other. And once they form an agreement, it's stored on our back end as a custom agreement for those sides. So it's free to sign up and it's open for either side to be proactive and take it on for their property.
And they can change the split. So sometimes it's 80-20, 80% the tenant gets the split and then 20% the landlord, or they
That's
can
true.
However they want.
Yeah, very customizable. So there's different revenue share percentages depending on how active the resident will be hosting, or if the building owner is involved in some way. So the kind of average we're seeing is about 80% is left with tenant host. So 80-20 split is a pretty normal split that we're seeing for this approval, but it could be 70-30 or 90-10, depending on how much involvement either side has in the transaction. There's other components like limiting how many guests you can have, or in some buildings, this is more targeted for apartment complexes, that they can slow down the sort of velocity of hosting if it matches that building, so that the other residents don't get overwhelmed with the kind of a hotelization of their floor. So there's different customized tools that might not be needed for all people, but if you want those, then you can customize it for your particular case. So we store all those on the back end, so you can have individual agreements for each unit.
Perfect.
I probably don't need to go through this with this crowd because it's pretty Airbnb savvy, but the Airbnb host protection program is in place for each listing, and it also is conveyed on the building owner as additionally insured. Of course, if the building owner wants more security, they can request a higher security deposit from the guests, and Airbnb does a great job with their technology of verifying the identities of the guests through online profiles and government IDs. So that's all in place too with this activity that protects the owner.
Perfect. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Did I jump ahead too quickly, Mark?
No, you're great. I think one last slide, I believe, is there when you're
Not on.
ready. Oh, okay. Well, thank you guys. Let You Let, our mission really is to give property investors and property owners the best of both worlds, where they can have the stability of long-term tenants but also tap the benefits of short-term rentals. And of course, with residents, you guys, we touched on it earlier. I think people are really craving a more flexible life, especially after COVID. Now that the work from home dynamic is in place, it's not so necessary to pick one city and just plunk down, where renting is much more appealing in that way because you can move around. So we're trying to do everything we can to reduce living expenses for renters and give them real opportunities with short-term rentals to do that. So I appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you sharing your insight. And I think it's a great tool to really help a renter if they're trying to get into a home, also from a down payment standpoint on creating some extra cash. I think the flexibility of renting, but I've been a homeowner and I love the flexibility of just renting out my home too.
Yeah, that's true. There is.
Perfect.
Really.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to flip over and introduce our panelists that are our actual short-term rental hosts in the Denver area and the mountain properties here in Colorado. Kim Purdy has a primary residence. She's kind of like myself, who when she's not staying there, she'll rent it out. And then she also has an ADU unit that she rents out. Kim, do you want to just tell us a little bit about your property and how you got involved in short-term rental?
Yeah, just to double check, you can hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So I purchased a property in Denver in 2017 that had the main house already redone. And my entire goal with that purchase was to eventually live rent-free, mortgage-free. I didn't want to pay for my own housing effectively, outside of course, taxes and insurance and whatnot. But it took me most of 2017 to get my ducks in a row to do the construction on the ADU project, which is, you know, a carriage house or mother-in-law over a garage. So once I was able to get that done, construction started in March of 2018. And they were done by, I think, July. So nowadays, I pretty much just live in the carriage house for the majority of the time. And I'm able to rent out the 3-bedroom structure. It's all one property, which is the nice part for Denver's rules of primary. It's, you know, the lots could never be split. So it's my primary residence. And when I have family in town or guests that I want to stay with in the house, then it's super flexible and I have total control over those calendars. But, you know, here we are in 2020 and successfully covering my mortgage payments for that property and the construction note, and then some.
Perfect. And I'm going to get back into 2020 in just a little bit on just how changes made, but I'm going to each of our panelists just kind of talk about their property. And Colleen has a cute little short-term rental that, remind me, was this an old church?
So my husband and I, we live in Denver, but we bought a weekend home about 4 years ago in Salida along the Arkansas River, and it's on a couple acres. And our home was the original one-room schoolhouse in the 1890s for Chaffee County, and a ranching family owned all the land. And in early mid 2000s, they renovated the schoolhouse because it had kind of fallen into disrepair. And so I'm in our schoolhouse right now. This is actually one of the additions. So they renovated that. And in the process of that, they built what you're looking at, which is the garage, which is a 2-car garage with a workshop on the bottom. And they built up top with the round circle window what they called a bunkhouse. It was just a big open space with a bathroom, big bathroom and kitchen. So when my husband and I bought the property, it was just the two of us. We didn't need another apartment. So what we did was we built that out into a 2-bedroom and we started Airbnb-ing it. Well, actually my sister and her son lived in it for a couple months, and then we decided to just Airbnb it. And I had no idea what I was doing and just kind of did it. I decorated the whole thing, and it pays our mortgage for the other house.
That's amazing. That's 100%.
So we call this the Pinion Grove Barn House because it's, our house is historically called the Pinion Grove Schoolhouse. And we still have the 2 girl and boy outhouses, and the kids have carved their names from the 1890s in the brick. So since this looks like a barn, we named it the Pinion Grove Barn House.
Oh, I love it. That's such a great story. And that's 100% why I love short-term rentals and why I got into mortgage lending, because of exactly what Hugh and Kim said. It's like they can pay your mortgage for you and you can have your second
Yep.
house. Perfect. And Stephanie, did I get you unmuted?
I think so.
Okay, perfect. I can see you and hear you.
Great. So we own 2 properties, one in Steamboat and one in Winter Park. Initially, we were looking for a second home, and we decided that Steamboat was going to be that place for our second home. So when deciding where to purchase, it was, again, location. Are we on the mountain? Do we want to be down in town? We decided to be on the mountain. And then we began to test our short-term rental during peak season and holidays, when we really didn't want to be there because of the crowds. And again, this was just kind of to cover our, I mean, if you know, mountain resorts, there's a lot of HOA cost involved. So that was just kind of to help cover our HOA. And we were successful in Steamboat, and then we decided to look into Winter Park, and we decided to buy an investment property there. It's a ski in, ski out. And yeah, and they've been great investments for us so far.
Perfect. And I see on your Steamboat property, you have an SUV included. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yes, so in this day and age, with the competition of the property management companies that can offer lift discounts, which we cannot, we wanted to differentiate ourselves. So instead of somebody coming in, you can now fly directly into Hayden instead of flying to Denver, renting a car and driving 3 hours. Well, now you don't have to rent a car. We provide the SUV for you.
Wow, that's very unique and different. Perfect. And I'll come back around and ask more COVID specific questions too on how that's been impacted. But I want to jump over to Micah. Micah, can you tell us a little bit about your Airbnb and how you got that started?
Yeah, absolutely. So similar story to what you've been hearing. I was actually just looking for a new property because we didn't really care for our neighbors too much at the house we were currently at with some barking dogs. And I was just casually looking and stumbled onto a house with a ADU. And in this case, it's an above garage finished space, but in this case, it was unfinished. So I showed my wife the property and she fell in love with it because it backed up to some open space and just was a really awesome lot. But the whole time I was sitting there looking at that ADU thinking that's going to be a great rental. I'd never actually considered short-term rental. I just thought I'd rent it out long-term and make the money that I was going to invest back in 6-7 years was going to be my estimate for what I could rent it out long-term. And then halfway through finishing it, I brought my father down from Montana and he spent 3 months at my house finishing it with my help. And finally, about 3/4 of the way done, I had a friend that told me about like how well he does on Airbnb with a basement. I was like, never thought about that. And decided to go ahead and go for it and try it out. And similar story to the other two, I'm more than paying my mortgage on the main house off of a 500 square foot ADU.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So the next question I have for the panelists is, what did March look like and how does that differ from now? If anybody just wants to unmute themselves and go first.
I'll just kind of jump in since I was
Okay.
still going, since I was there already. So probably similar to what everyone's going to say, March rolled around. You started hearing a little bit of the nervousness. I was lucky at first. I was seeing on some Facebook groups about everyone else losing cancellation after cancellation, but I was still holding pretty strong for the first few weeks. And then once it really hit full swing, I lost every single booking in a matter of 3 days for the rest of the year. I had just had a lady check out a couple days ago that told me she just moved to Colorado. She was actually looking for a place to live. She was looking for somewhere to rent. On her last day, she told me she didn't know what she was doing because with all this COVID, she didn't really want to go sign a 12-month lease. So then the next days when I really started losing everything, I messaged her back and asked if she was interested in just staying. If she'd found anything, she would just stay in a hotel for a few more days. And so I was able to save a little bit of the next couple months, probably about 50% off, but got her to stay for a couple months during the worst of it. But now it's actually better than it was before. June, July, and August have all been my best 3 months I've ever seen. Once it started picking up, I started raising my rates again a bunch, raised my cleaning fee because of everything, and I have had the most successful months ever so far this year.
Wow. Anybody else have similar stories of like switch to long-term or?
Our house is in March is usually fully booked because we're just 10 minutes from Monarch Mountain to ski.
Mm-hmm.
And the day that Polis shut down the ski resorts, we had guests who were here to ski from Kansas. And so they left. I refunded their money. And then we didn't have, I think Airbnb actually shut down and said you couldn't do bookings, but we didn't have any bookings for the rest of March or April. And my husband and I even talked about whether we wanted to keep doing short-term rentals because of liability in terms of having people coming in and out and the cleaning. With both of us being lawyers, that's what we think about, getting sued. But then from May 1st until August 31st, we were booked. We had 2 bookings for the whole 4 months that all longer term, people who could remote work and just wanted to get out of Denver. And so we had one that booked for 3 months straight, another booked for a month, and then we have somebody booked for another month. We're seeing much more long-term, short-term, if that makes sense.
Long-term, short-term, yep. And Stephanie, how has your experience been?
Yeah, so mine has been similar with the long-term, short-term, more so in Steamboat. That property has been rented. I actually have to have them leave on the 19th because they want to keep extending. So we'd like to take advantage of our second home. And then in Winter Park, we've been probably at 75% capacity since everything opened up. It's kind of, when you're asking about March, I remember where I was. I remember exactly the day, like any tragedy, when just things started falling apart. I had people, tenants calling saying, "Where's my money? I want my money back," because Airbnb and VRBO were not able to handle the capacity of the volume of calls. And we didn't really know what was going on at that point. So it was just kind of rolling with the punches. And, but yeah, it was interesting for the month of March and April, because we were almost 99% fully booked.
Yep. And Kim, what was your experience?
Yeah, basically, really similar. My place is right downtown. You can see the convention center from my front porch. So the majority of my bookings tend to be folks in for a conference or sporting events over at the Pepsi Center or just downtown work. So I kind of feel that the hotel curve that we saw where they got hit really hard was kind of like me on the front end. Everything was gone even before March 1st rolled around. I think I remember the first guy canceled for a tech conference the end of February. Yeah. And then I did transition to kind of a midterm. I coined Cole coined executive furnished with gig internet speed. So come and work remote, work wherever. So I tried to fill June and July kind of with those types of people, but I got hit really hard for March, April, and May. I couldn't get any bookings and just couldn't get my feet under me to really have some folks in there. So August and September, I've got these midterm groups in that are taking advantage of the work remote options, and then I'm opening it back up to short term finally for next month. So I've got at least 2 full weekends booked at this point. I've just been really hesitant to open it up because there's just no activity in downtown Denver. It's not the mountains. It's not, nobody wants to spend time outside downtown Denver right now. So
Yep, it's kind of a shift in where. And what's interesting about all of you that are hosts in different places is even though it's been like from March, like really probably what, like 4 weeks was kind of terrible. And then it kind of started picking up a little bit, or being able to switch to that midterm short term. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And then Dana, I don't know if you have any statistics. I thought I saw something where that long-term stays from like a 30-day stay is kind of shifting lower numbers now. Do you have any info on that, Dana?
Yeah, it's still, the booking window is still small, as far as like a lot of people are still doing a last minute booking, where traditionally, especially for our mountain properties, they would plan a vacation in advance, which indicates that we should stay strong on holding our higher pricing and not discount it too much, knowing that people are looking last minute to get out. And then the stays are shortening as well. You know, we were seeing 8 weeks, 2 months. And they're returning a lot closer to how they were pre-COVID for what we're seeing at our properties.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Any other last minute comments about their properties or short-term rentals? And I guess I want to ask the question before we go in there, like after experiencing COVID, which is probably the sharpest decrease in bookings and one of the most like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Would you as a short-term rental host do it over again, or would you invest in another property?
I wanted to get another one.
I am actively looking for one at this moment.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not, you know, it stung and it hurt and you learned a lot, but it doesn't really scare me off. And I think just growing the network, like doing these kind of things, and the network of people that you can get tenants from or reach out when stuff goes wrong is what I've learned, is just to have a big network of people I can reach to.
And I would say absolutely as well. I mean, we actually stayed in a hotel in Fort Collins this week, and it felt really different. I think that people are going to switch, like you had said in the beginning of the presentation. People want to be able to have a kitchen, their own space, and not be sharing it with other people. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Stephanie there. What we're seeing is a shift in the alternative accommodations. They offer so much more security. We did have an experience. We stayed in a hotel recently, and it's I think that the human behavior is going to change quite a bit after this, and it just was not a comfortable experience being in a hotel. And I think alternative accommodations are really in a good position in the future. So I would stay very bullish on it. And we're also seeing at Let more willingness from the supply side, which are the landlords, to adapt short-term rentals into their building, into more vacancy, and their revenues are going down. They're looking for ways to fill new leases, and whereas before COVID, they're a bit maybe reluctant to take on that kind of risk because the rents were so high, and they're doing great business without it. There's now quite a shift towards trying to figure out different amenities to attract new residents, and short-term rentals are definitely a amenity that they're looking for. So I think both of those trends are just really positive for the whole future of alternative accommodations.
Absolutely. And I think one of my takeaways from the panelists and my own experience is when investing into a short-term rental, making sure that that you can cover your mortgage and your expenses either on short-term rental projections, or if you need to shift and go into a long-term scenario, that a long-term rental will still be able to, you'll still be able to pay your mortgage and your expenses with a long-term renter as well. I'll open it up to any questions from anybody. If anybody has any comments, questions, or wants to say anything. I mean, I'll allow people to talk as well. Anybody have questions for the panelists or for?
I don't have any questions. Can you hear me?
I can.
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you all for your expertise. I am retired and have a short-term rental, and that is another place that helps with income. And it is very nice to hear all of your professionalism and what's going on in the future. And I would 100% invest in another mortgage or another rental just to have places around the world that I can go visit.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Well, I'll also just add, once COVID's over and we're hopefully back to normal travel, my husband and I, since we don't Airbnb our main home here in Salida or our home in Denver, we have thought what Jody, you just said about if we want to go travel, that we could also Airbnb our house in Salida and our house in Denver while we travel, because Salida doesn't have the restrictions that Denver does, that it has to be your primary home. So we're not afoul of any of that. And since Denver would be considered our primary home, but we're traveling for a while, so we could actually make a lot of money to fund our travel if we decide to do that. Of course, it hurts the local real estate work when you leave,
But you can go just, I think Jody would join you. Oh, perfect.
And we're actually doing something similar, Colleen. We're since our primary residence is in Denver and we're kind of over all of this, it gives us the flexibility to either go up to the mountains or, you know, travel and go elsewhere for a while. So that's something we haven't done in the past, but we are definitely moving forward, hopefully by the end of the month. So.
Perfect. Well, I just want to say thank you to the panelists and to Effortless and Let You Let for putting this together. I know I learned a lot and I hope that it brought value to you as well. I will send out a copy of the presentation to everybody that was on today. And if you have any questions, please reach out to any one of us. I put our websites on there that have all of our contact information. And I did forget to mention both Colleen and Stephanie are real estate agents with Live Urban. So not only are they short-term rental hosts, but they also are abreast with what's going on in real estate in Denver. So hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you very much for putting this together.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Danielle. It was fun.
Oh, great.
It was very interesting.
Is this Zora or who's talking?
It's Zora.
Okay. I was like, I think that's you.
Yep, it's me.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thanks for joining. And Brent, I was curious if you have a short-term rental or what your curiosity was. Maybe he's not on anymore.
Maybe he left.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, thanks, Zora. I appreciate you joining.
okay, thanks.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.